Sachi Buki Jipshin Meto Tram Rira Blinchi Inde Gempali Sange Shindu Nikte Uvargi Drokun Anda Shinma Juparsho Vidam Guru Ratnamandala Kamkiryatayami Sange Chudam Silki Choknam La Janju Bardu Dakni Kyatsushi Dagi Chinyen Gipe Sunamki Rola Penchir Sange Druparsho Sange Chiram Soki Choknam La Janju Bardu Dakni Kyasuchi Daki Jinyen Gipe Sunamki Drola Penchir Sange Druparsho Sange Chunam Soki Choknam La Janju Bardu Dakni Kyasuchi Daki Jinyen Gipe Sunamki Drola Penchir Sange Druparsho.
Yeah, feel free to lie down if that works for you from last class. Let's start this session by relaxing. Letting your awareness descend from the head to the ground. Settling the body at ease. And allow your body to breathe. Relax your eyebrows. Relax your jaw. The corners of your mouth. Feel the weight of your arms. Begin to ground your body to the floor. Begin to settle your mind, releasing any concerns that you might have. Let them go. anxieties, fears that have been lingering all day. Just let it go for a few minutes during this meditation session. And then begin to release any noise and chit-chat that occupies the space of your mind. So that you're left with a certain level of clarity, poise, focus, but still relaxed. And then we'll begin the meditation with the first question, which is, what would it feel like right now to be truly happy? What would your happiness, the things you most want, the thing that you most desire, how would that feel like for you? As these ideas come to mind, begin to use your breath so that in every out-breath, you're arousing the aspiration, the feeling, the wish that you seek to have. And then begin putting it out into the world, feeling, may I find such well-being, such happiness, breathing life into this vision, and move into the realm of possibility, using each out-breath to actually imagine at this very moment what it would be like to fully feel and experience the very happiness that you wish to have. Moving on to the second question. in order to realize the happiness that we seek to have, we also realize that our lives are so intertwined and interconnected. So in order to realize the happiness that you seek, what would you love to receive from the world around you? What kind of support do you need? How does that feel for you? And in the spirit of loving kindness, with each in-breath, begin to use your breath with every inhalation, filling yourself with the aspiration that you seek to have. And then drawing on the power of your imagination, imagine you're receiving all that you truly need from the world around you. Imagine what that would feel like and look like. Imagine reality rising up to meet you, to find the happiness that you seek. And then moving to our last question for the evening. We realize it's not enough to just receive help from the outside. That for most of us, there is some sort of inner transformation that is required. Some sort of blockage that usually needs to be dispelled. So the question is, how would you love to transform? How would you love to evolve? How would you love to change? And what would that change feel like? What change is required from you in order to realize the happiness you'd like to see? And with every out-breath, begin to use each exhalation to arouse this aspiration, the inner transformation that will bring this change. And then for the remainder of the time, sit and imagine that the transformation that you've been meditating on has taken place. Imagine that you have become the person that you've wanted to transform into. Imagine being in that body, in that mind. What would you feel like now? How do you see this world? Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about we're in class 8. We're going to be talking about how to destroy the roots of your virtue. But before we do that,
เขาจะได้อะไรถ้าเขาทำแบบนี้ทุกวันเขาจะไม่ได้อะไรเลยไม่ได้รวยขึ้น ไม่ได้ออกทีวีไม่มีใครรู้จักไม่ได้มีชื่อเสียงที่มากขึ้นเพราะสิ่งที่เขาได้คือได้แค่ความรู้สึกได้เห็นความสุขได้เข้าใจได้ความรักได้ในสิ่งที่เงินซื้อไม่ได้ได้โลกที่สวยงามกว่าเดิมในชีวิตคุณอะไรคือสิ่งที่คุณต้องการมากที่สุด
ไทยประกันชีวิตเชื่อในความดี
All right. So we're talking about, I hope you enjoyed that. I just saw that. I thought it was really lovely. I was watching it at work and someone on my team started crying. She was like bawling watching it, which I thought was...
What a dork.
Okay. So we're going to talk about how to destroy the roots of your virtue. And we're going to start with two collections. This is the first of the two collections. Can you say Sunam Giso?
Sunam Giso.
So Sunam is merit, Gi is of, and Sok is collection. So this is a collection of merit. The collection of merit is one it's one of the two collections, and it relates specifically to the four perfections. Do we remember what the four perfections are? Do you remember what the perfections are?
Perfection of wisdom.
Yeah, there's 6. So, sorry, do you remember what the 4 out of... I see your face being like...
Ethics.
I'm sorry. The first 4? Giving. What else?
Patience.
Morality.
There's morality. There's patience. And what else? Joyful effort, right? So there's 6. So I'm just going to write these up there for you. You can never write them enough, I feel like. They're so basic and important. Okay, so we have 6 perfections: generosity, virtue, or morality, patience, joyful effort, concentration, wisdom. Those are the 6. So the first collection, the collection of merit, is based on the first 4. So, and when we talk about patience in particular, just to know, in the 4 of the 6 perfections, when we talk about patience in particular, it's not like the patience of like being able to stand in line for a long time at a Duane Reade, which takes forever every time. I don't know why. Or, I don't know, the Bank of America ATM line for me is just like never ends. That's not the kind of patience. The patience that they're specifically speaking to is the patience of withholding anger. And we'll go into a little bit tonight, actually. Withholding anger. It specifically is addressing the ability to withhold from anger. And that's the patience. It's the patience where when you're pushed so far to the point where you should be exploding or upset or it just pushes your buttons, that you actually don't do that anymore. And the perfections are actually a build. Each one is the concept, which you kind of generally do all, but conceptually the idea is that one builds on another. Once you can master the first perfection, then you can move on to the ones moving past it. The idea of effort too, it's really the way that we use it in the Sangha, and you'll see it different ways of how it's expressed, but we really talk about it in terms of joyful effort, meaning that it's not just like obligatory effort, which doesn't always sound joyful to me. That's a different kind of effort. What we're saying here specifically is to embrace and have joy while you do the things that even you may not want to do. Or when you do the things you want to do, you also come with joy around it. Because I've sometimes noticed people that will put in effort, and then there's like expectation that's layered onto it. But another part of it, they'll do something that actually brings them joy, but they won't even do it with a joyful sense. They'll do it knowing, like having this feeling like, well, it's good now, but it's going to get worse later. And there's a weird narrative that comes along with it. So this idea of joyful effort is very much around this concept of you put in the energy, you put in the effort, but there is this sense of, I don't even know if delight's the right word, but joy is the way that we express it. That you do it with a pleasantry to it, Okay? So this specific collection, the collection of wisdom, it speaks to the first 4 of the 6 perfections. It also consists of for the most part, all the deeds that you have done. It's the virtue of the deeds that you've done. And it's the cause of, one of the main causes of this collection is the form body, or what we call the Rupakaya. Do you remember we talked about Rupakaya? I think it was course 2, the 2 wings, right? Okay. So Rupakaya is what? Does anyone remember? The physical body of the Buddha. It's the physical body, so it's the form body or the physical. So what they're saying is that the collection of merit is what creates the form body. It gives you it's the virtue that creates the form body of the Buddha, or the Rupakaya. And the form body can be, in this case, when we talk about the Buddha, it could be the physical body in the way in which the Buddha presents the way that we might see in our physical form, but also in the form body in paradise form, or in paradise. Okay. The second collection, can you say Yeshe Gisok? So Yeshe is wisdom, Gi is of, and Sok is collection. So this is the collection of wisdom. So if the collection of merit were the first 4 perfections, what do you suspect the collection of wisdom would be? Concentration and wisdom, right? And so, if the collection of merit was the Rupakaya, what would the collection of wisdom be?
Dharmakaya.
The Dharmakaya. And what's the Dharmakaya?
Wisdom body.
The wisdom body. And what do we know the parts of the wisdom body? There are 2 parts of the wisdom body.
Correct view? Or
There is a correct view. There's an emptiness, like the emptiness of the Buddha. And what else?
Renunciation.
no.
Mind.
Bodhicitta.
Someone said mind. I heard mind. Yeah. There's the mind, the knowledge, right? There's the knowledge. There's the mind of the Dharmakaya. And then there is the actual understanding of emptiness. Okay, there are 2 parts of it. And the idea is that what they say is that in the scriptures, they say that after you have the direct perception of emptiness, that's when you actually see the Buddha's real nature. Okay? And so these 2 that we have, the collection of wisdom and collection of merit, are the accumulation of basically all your virtuous deeds, all your deeds that you've collected. Can you say Getsa Chupa? So Ge is virtue, Sa is root, and Chupa is cutting. And this is destroying your root of virtue. So we're going to talk about how do you destroy the root of your virtue? And when they talk about destroying the root of your virtue, they're actually speaking more specifically to the collection of merit. That there are certain acts that you can have that will completely, basically, demolish or destroy all the virtue that you've collected. So any good that you've done, you've basically like collected all this goodness. Like you have this, think of it as like this savings account that you have of all this good karma. And there are actual activities that we're going to talk about tonight that will blow up your bank account without you being able to cash out on it at all. Does that work? That works, right? I know, it does suck. And it's important, and it's something that it's important both in the Hinayana and the Mahayana tradition, and it applies to both. There are some subtleties which we'll talk about tonight, but I think it's important to know what those are while you're in the process of collecting and saving. Okay, so the two things that can cut your root virtue or obliterate your virtue, the good that you've collected. The first one, can you say lokta? So lokta means diametric opposite view. I know, it's kind of like what it means is thinking the complete opposite of how something really exists. So in the Abhidharma system, okay, the idea is that if you think that something that doesn't really exist, if you're looking at something that exists and you think it doesn't exist, in particular, the example that they have is probably what? Only two subjects that we've been really talking about, but one in particular and why we're here.
Something wet and flowing.
Emptiness.
Water in a
Correct
cup.
views.
Yes, karma. Yes, of course. That's why we're here. If you think, for instance, that karma doesn't exist at all, that you actually are completely opposed to it. And this doesn't mean that you're skeptical of it. It actually means that you are just completely like, it does not exist. It's not possible. You have this idea of complete rejection. They're saying that that would actually obliterate your merit that you've collected. Now, what they will also say, we'll say it here and then we'll say it again later on, is that when you do have doubt, that's why, like, when things aren't functioning or working or they don't make sense for you, one thing that you'll hear me say is just table it or shelve it for now. It's one thing to say it's not working for me now. It's another thing to say outrightly, like, this is not possible, it's not true. And that's the difference, okay? So if you are on the fence or you have skepticism, that's totally all game. Like, you're still in a good place according to this system. But what they're saying is that when you do have concepts, especially in relation to karma, for example, or emptiness for that matter, and you're not completely sure about it, it's in your best interest to actually shelve it and wait and just leave it to the side rather than to completely be opposed to it. Which I think in general is a kind of good principle in life, don't you think? Like, if it doesn't work for you, I don't know, for the most part, it feels like that makes sense. Especially if Mercury's in retrograde. Yeah.
But this is a sort of doctrinal dogmatism, right? That it's like the conversation you and I had before about Christianity, and if you say, well, if you don't believe in God, you're never getting to heaven. Or you don't believe in Jesus. Even if you believe in God, and if you don't believe in Jesus, you're never getting to heaven.
Yeah.
I mean, this is kind of the same thing, isn't it? You're basically saying, if you're a Christian and you don't believe in karma,
sure,
you're screwed,
mm-hmm.
right? So there is in essence a belief requirement in this system in order for you to ever achieve whatever you want to call it.
Well, they're not going to tell you that you're screwed.
Well, they're going to tell you all your.
But they're not going to tell you that you're going to go to hell. They're just going to say that your virtue, that you've basically obliterated all your good karma.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
According to the system.
Maybe that's not screwed, but that's not.
I mean, if you don't believe in it, I guess it doesn't really matter anyway.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I think that, yes, I mean, according to this teaching and to this system, that is what they're saying. That being said, based on our conversation that we've had and from teachings I've had and received, in particular, we're talking about the Dalai Lama and his perspective of religion. Have I ever heard a high teacher or a Lama ever say, if you do not subscribe to Buddhism, you will go to hell? No, I've never heard that. You know, so take what you need and what makes sense to you, and don't what you don't. But regardless, I think the main key takeaway is if it doesn't work for you, it's in your best interest to just shelve it rather than to completely reject it. That's really the main point. Which I kind of like. I like that kind of open system, personally, because I think that some religions are very black and white. And to here, they're not saying you have to. It is subtly different, though, because they're not saying you have to believe in it. They're just saying don't completely reject it. That's, to me, a difference than going to,
Right.
Yeah.
But is it screwing up your virtue to doubt it?
No, not according to what they're saying. They're saying skepticism works. Like, it's impossible to accept or expect someone to buy in completely. But it's a different thing energetically and karmically to say that you're completely opposed to it. Doubt and skepticism is healthy, actually. And there should be a healthy level of skepticism, I think, in any spiritual practice.
So just one more question. So is there a deficiency in completely accepting it? I mean, both would be a kind of dogmatic view, and skepticism sits in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Skepticism is the active mind.
Mm-hmm.
The belief or the disbelief is the made-up mind. So I'm just curious if the view is that dogged belief in this, not good for your virtue, dogged disbelief in this, not good for your virtue, skepticism is okay. That's a question, not a statement. Just curious.
Well, a lot of teachers have said that Buddhism in the West has such a great opportunity to flourish because we are questioning these things. It's like you grow up in the culture where Buddhism traditionally comes from,
Mm-hmm.
and you're taught as a child that rebirth and karma are out there. So you don't get the chance to analyze them in the way that we're analyzing them now. So yeah, if you're skeptical, you're more likely to analyze it to the point where you can whittle it down and find the emptiness of it and find out what it really is.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you just believe it, you don't actually have the opportunity to really dig in and
See
get
if that makes
closest
sense.
to
It's true.
seeing it directly.
It's true. Yeah. Thank you. It's true.
Just go back to the slide before.
Oh, yeah. This side?
Question.
Mm.
The virtue that we're talking about destroying the root of potentially, I'm just trying to connect, is that connected to like the black-white mixed karma that we talked about? Because I thought, like, is it some sort of pure virtue that you're actually able to create, or isn't it inherently sort of saved by ignorance anyways?
Okay, that's fair. Yes. Sure. Sure.
That is the virtue we're talking about is what's creating the two collections. And so then
It's not creating it. It's like it's just two different categories. Like the virtue is virtues are a collection of the two, merit and wisdom.
But those collections aren't from black and white mixed karmas?
No, they would be.
They would be?
Sure.
But how can something that's seen by ignorance produce something that is associated with enlightenment?
Because as you start to clean your karma, that starts to change and shift, right? That's why you still have the 6 perfections. You still have them, and you still build them. And as you start to move into your practice and move up not that you're moving up the ladder, but let's say we're moving up the ladder, you start to clean your karma so that it becomes more pure, is my understanding of it. Yeah. But even if you have mixed karmas, there's still pureness in there.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay.
I don't know, when I think about mixed karmas, I don't think of it as like black and white as gray.
Yeah.
I think of it as like Oreos. Like, is that? They're very, like, it's like a divide. That's how I feel about it. I don't think they're like a blend. Like you can actually, I don't know. That's just me. That has nothing to do with scripture. There are no Oreos in the scripture. Yes, but that's how I think of it.
Is it tangible?
Or like a black and white cookie. Yes, sorry.
I'm sorry. The way you were talking about it, looks like it's like almost our chakra that like our can be like, you know, purified or not. So is it something like tangible, like did scientifically we prove that there is a space in our body that hold the karma? Or because I know that for the soul, like I'm Jewish, so like I know a lot about Judaism, and I know for a fact that there is scientifically proof that a soul is somewhere in a psychic. So I was wondering for that if we have.
Is the question
for the for the karma, like physically, like
where does it live?
Yeah.
Let's talk about after class because we did talk about that. There are two different systems of how it lives, but basically the short version of it is one belief system or one of the belief systems that we've been studying. It actually, your karmas live in this other kind of consciousness that's called the kunchi, and then or it actually lives within your what they call as your simple self that exists within you, but not within you in terms of what your physical body is. It's more like within your ultimate you. Okay, that worked? Okay. Cool. Okay. Second one, based on the middle way, the second one is, can you say kontro? Kontro. So kontro is anger. And it's specifically speaking about the anger directed at a bodhisattva. What is a bodhisattva?
A person who has seen the direct perception of emptiness and bodhicitta.
What's bodhicitta? Well, we can start there. Let's start with bodhicitta.
Bodhicitta. The desire to end suffering for every living being.
So what's a bodhisattva?
A person who has bodhicitta.
Yeah. And so what they're saying here is Chandrakirti is the master of the middle way, and he created the books of the 6 perfections. And in the 6 perfections, what we talked about earlier, right, out of the 6, the third one, which is the 3rd chapter of patience, there's actually a moment within the third perfection where if you're able to completely accomplish 1, 2, and 3, that you've actually moved into the third, like you've moved into being a bodhisattva. It's that third point that's a very specific pivot point. And so what they're bringing up here is that the anger that you have towards a bodhisattva is what will actually karmically completely demolish your virtue. And that's why anger is so powerful and important to not do. Now, how do you know if there's a bodhisattva? Like, how do you know that the person that you screamed at or that you got impatient with last week or yesterday or today? How do you know that if they're a bodhisattva or not?
You don't.
You assume
don't know.
everyone is.
You should assume that everyone is. Why?
Because that's the safest bet.
Okay, but that is one way to do it. Yes. What's life insurance?
I think because if you treat everyone as a bodhisattva, then that makes you become one.
Okay. Anyone else? Why would you just assume?
Because they might actually be.
They might actually be. Yeah.
And they might actually be yelling at you.
Yeah.
To help you overcome your anger.
Oh, it might be a test. Didn't you talk about them testing you? That was like one of the things that like a proper leader, what's the correct word for it, they do. That's one of the things that they do is like they may test you out of anger to teach you something, right?
Yeah, so yes, I don't know exactly which
like,
leader,
not
but
guru, but I forget the word, like a spiritual guide.
Yeah.
Your teacher will push your buttons.
Well, the teacher will push your buttons.
What if all of that is bodhisattva?
It might be true. I know it's not frightening, but it might be true. No, for sure. The reason why it's so important is that, and we talked about this in course, it might have been course 3 or 2, but we did talk about if you can't read someone's mind completely, right? If you don't have omniscience, who are you to say and who are you to know what people's motivations are ultimately? Right? Like, really? I'll give you an example that's like I feel like such an ass, which has to do, of course, with my story with my husband. And so Armando we were working we're at work, we're just like in our studio working. And there's like a team, I have one of my teams that's working on a bunch of stuff, and sometimes I'll walk back and forth and I'll see something they're working on, and I can see that they're like struggling with something. So I'll kind of pop in and be like, hey, like I'll notice something, I'll give my 2 cents and I'll walk away and whatnot. And that day Armando came to me and goes, G, like maybe you should just let them figure it out. Like just let them figure it out and like just wait for people to ask you. You don't need to always like be poking in and getting it all up in everyone's business. So I took a little offense to that, but I was like, okay, that's cool. It's fine. I understand what he's saying. And then it was like maybe a couple hours later, they had wrote me in and they'd asked me a question like, hey, G, what do you think about this? So I was engaging, and then there was this pause, and then Armando had walked in and he was about to say something. He was like, I just saw him like about to say something, and before he can even say it, I snapped at him. And I was like, they told me that they wanted me to ask, they're asking me for my opinion. And he looked at me, he was like, I was just going to ask you if you're going to have lunch today. And there was just that moment, that I just like preempted that he was going to come. Like in my mind, it was like he's coming at me. Like I told you, slow-mo and it wasn't that at all. And I remember just standing there feeling like such an ass. Like, I'm sorry, that is not, and that was not like, that's a pretty gentle moment, but there are so many times where we think that, oh, that email came in and they said it that way, and this is what they really meant, And then we create these whole stories, and then you're like angry typing, and then just saving and then deciding if you want to even send that email or not, or text messages that come and you're like, what does that mean? Or we have so many moments, especially in the tech space, but even with people where someone will say something or do something and will take it a certain way that may not even be true at all, at all. And it may not even be what you think it was supposed to be at all. And it might actually be, to your point, it could be funny enough, but just consider, what if it's just a test? What if it's just to show you that there's just a lot of shit you need to work on? And that's all it is. It's like, why are you getting all upset about that thing? It's fine. Let it go. Relax. What are you getting all wound up about, right? And so this idea of anger in particular, that's so interesting, and in particular anger as it is directed to a bodhisattva, how do you know that everyone around you isn't here and existing to actually serve you, so that the joke's kind of on you? Like, we all get it. Do you get it? Sort of thing. Is one way that I've looked at it. Okay. Does that make sense? It would be interesting for you to go back into your world tonight and tomorrow and just consider, what if that really crappy coworker that doesn't get anything done, that's just so difficult, and makes everything so difficult every time, or that boss or that neighbor who's just always hovering around you and making life a little bit more uneasy for you, right? Or the roommates or the friends or the partners. Like, what if they're just trying to show you where you're at and to show you what you might need to work on? And that's really all it is. And you're just spitting, fireballs at them because you don't get it. Like, imagine what that would be for you and how that might be different in terms of how you act and react and consider your world. Like that opportunity. Like when I was walking here, I was carrying something for Miriam, and there was this guy that was asking other people on the street for a quarter. And as he was approaching me, the stuff that was in the bag, Miriam, just so you know, there's a hole. it spilled out. And he looked at me and goes, oh, and he backed away. And I'm like, well, you're not going to help me? At this moment, I was like, oh, if I had a quarter, you would come. But like, I just dropped all this, like this stuff just come. And he was like, oh no, I got it. And I saw this like moment and there was like judgment that came out. I was really upset. Like, what? Like if I had a quarter, would you help me? You know, this kind of, and so even like subtle moments of how we have judgments that we put on, right? Even if I didn't say anything, but there are those moments where you don't have to do it, but you think it. Like, what if that was something where it was actually an opportunity for me to see something differently and be like, I wonder what that was about. I wonder where that came from. I wonder why, like, even if it was a moment of like, I wonder if there was a time in my life where I probably could have helped someone out, but it was a little inconvenient. So I just decided to kind of skirt away from it. Like, is that even a possibility? Sure, totally. Like, yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Is there a path of action that, like, you know, from last class, there's like those 4 steps for the path of action. So like with anger, could you like kind of reel back, you know, because it's like you can be aware of like anger arising or something, but you don't get to step 4 where you complete the action. Is that kind of, is there a safe zone with that? You know?
In terms of completion versus thinking?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's definitely a very significant difference of thinking something and then like having the feeling rise, which at that moment you can't really help that, right? That's your karma that's coming up, right? So it's not possible for me to stop the fumes that are kind of being released in that moment. But at that moment, there's a difference between, do I let that propel itself so that I actually do something, or do I not? And one thing I was just sharing with Michael, which wasn't about this topic, but actually was shared with me last year from another teacher in terms of afflictions and anger in particular, which was actually really helpful for me. And I've shared to you guys in past classes, was when you have moments of affliction, when somebody apparently or appears to be conventionally pissing you off or annoying you or aggravating you, rather than focusing on that person, of how that person is pissing you off, you actually change the object of focus instead of being the person, but the thing, the feeling of which is pissing you off. And you focus on, why does it upset you? And so when you shift it from the object of the human or the beings, right? Right, it could be animals even. My dog would really upset me a lot of times. Anyway, but moving it from the being to the object of you and your emotions, that I have found diffuses. Because when I think of a person self-existently being the creator of the cause of my affliction, then the focus becomes so outer that it moves. It just becomes like mulling over how much that person is such a dickhead, you know? Like, that's all I think about. And then all the like the data that needs to support the dickheadness, you know? And then it's like all the people that I also need to accumulate to make sure that that is all aligned, you know? And there's all this like process that goes along with that, rather than being like, oh, that for some reason triggered something. What is that trigger? Why did that trigger? And what is that affliction that I have? And sit with my affliction. And so that shifts it, because it's funny when that happens too, because I don't mull over it as much, like on myself versus like on someone else, which I find interesting. Like what we're habituated in doing. Okay. Yes.
I have a question about this, because I 1000% have been angry at bodhisattvas, for sure. And so, like, I'm there and they say the thing that makes me so mad, okay? And then you're saying that, like what happens is that I try to analyze the emotion, but then that I'm good at. Like, I can pick things apart and it was like this and do a whole psychoanalysis. Yeah. But like the heat and the rage of the anger,
You can't diffuse it.
I don't know what to do with that. Like it doesn't just like magically disappear. And like it's all it wants to do is throw itself onto the person.
Yeah.
Or I could like also pitch it back on myself and be like, well, this is my karma. This is all my fault.
Yeah.
But I don't know what to do with the physical rage.
Yeah.
Like the sensations that go with that.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
The second part of it, try to refrain from that, because I think that's a very easy loophole that a lot of Dharma practitioners get in, where you're like, oh, it's my karma, I deserve, there's like this deserving of it, which I've found for myself to be incredibly unhealthy. And it brings shame and it brings like all this other baggage. That's not really the point. As far as the physicality of that anger that you have, the thing that comes to mind for me is, for me, when I think about it, and this is just from my own personal practice, it really has more to do with compassion. It becomes a compassion practice and a Tonglen practice for me. Because if it's not an intellectual like process that you need to work through, then at least for me, it's been usually something where I just don't feel like I'm being heard. And then it also has to do with the fact that I'm not being heard because I don't really let myself hear myself. And then there becomes loving kindness and compassion that I need to do to myself first. And once I can move into that, then it's easier for me to not be so angry at that person because they didn't do it to me. And that's not a very easy practice either. But that's what has been the most helpful for me. Because in some ways, I've noticed for me at least, that when that happens, as much as it upsets me, I also use it to validate in some weird, like unhealthy way of a story that I've created about myself that I deserve this punishment and that I'm not that good, even though I feel like I should be, but like it's like mind-body disconnect. And so then it becomes, for me, it's like, how do I connect further with my body? And that becomes a compassion. And sometimes it's a meditation. Other times I've had, really it sounds so silly, but practices where, for those of you who have one, because it's not very common in New York City, but if you have a bathtub, like just giving myself a bath every night. And I would create like a divine bath and like do just a beautiful ritual of taking care of myself. And that's also really hard to do and make it a practice. It's much easier to schedule beating up myself than taking care of myself. Like I can schedule that. I actually don't even have to schedule it. I can just like bake it into my day. It's really easy. But like to take a moment to be like, you should go to the bathroom and stop holding for the next 2 hours, you know, or like sit and eat and don't worry about your phone and just like enjoy the day. Or on Sunday, Armando and I were working and I just had this moment where I was like, I'm done. I gotta stop. Like we just need to go outside and pack a nice little dinner picnic and just enjoy, like have a moment. It's hard. Like on my calendar, I have literally every Thursday night, date night. Like it is it's scheduled. And you know what I do every Thursday night? It's deleted. I'm like, erase. And they're like, just this one? I'm like, yes, because I probably should be all, but then, so it's so hard, like taking care, but it is interesting, right? It's like, how do we do things to take care of ourselves and the people we love, and what does that mean? It's actually it's an incredibly difficult practice. And so, yes, there are these components where you have these 6 perfections, and I think a lot of the times we focus it so outwardly with the world around us, and not so much on like how we do it to ourselves. So maybe that's another way to start thinking of it as well, of like, how do you apply those 6 perfections for you? Like, how do you do that one a day for you? Like, how are you being patient to you? And what does that look like? Like, can you even do that? I have a journal I keep by my desk every day, and it's, I have 5 different categories that I fulfill every day. And in 2 of them, some are like, whatever, shop talk stuff, but 2 of them, there's always one thing in there that's always like a Dharma component. Like, what part of my day have I done actively that is aligned with my spiritual practice? Whether it's reading Dharma, whether it's meditating, whether it's having a conversation with a Dharma brother or sister, whatever that is, whatever form it needs to be, whether it's a podcast, it doesn't matter. Then I have something where it's simply like, did you do one nice thing for yourself today? And I have it like every day, and I look through my notebook. Usually at 1 o'clock, I do like a check-in, and I'm like, okay, how far did I get in? Because I have to plan that. And then I always have something like, did I do one nice thing for someone else today? Actively, what was that? Whether it was a favor that someone asked me, or a chore, or, bought someone a coffee, whatever. And it's just like, it's so strange because we're so trained to like think about ourselves in a selfish way rather than this place of generosity. And this idea of generosity and patience and kindness, those are the things that start to propel your mind to start to shift. And not just out there, right? Like the thing about bodhicitta, right, is this idea of what? Wanting to help all sentient beings, right? But that also includes you. Like you're in that bucket. And sometimes we think it's like all beings but me. That's not what this deal is. That sounds terrible. That is not a practice that I would want to be a part of. Right? So it's like, how do you include you into that category? And how do you make that part of your practice? Okay. Does that help? Yeah. Okay. I know. A little self-love.
Can I answer her question?
Sure.
You did too, but I'm just gonna give another idea.
Do it.
A little different one. Okay, so anger is like my first reaction when I'm pissed. I mean, physical body anger. And so I figured out how to make it work for me because I grew up with my mom being like, what does that say about you? And I'm like, that just pisses me off more. Like, I'm not thinking about what it has to do with me. I'm just more mad at you now. So like, just taking the anger that you have, the immediate anger that you have, and replacing it, like plucking it out and replacing it, like you said, with compassion, at least can alleviate like the body anger that I've had. And then after that, you can start to think like, okay, what does that say about me? Because now you're thinking like that, they're acting or reacting this way because of some experiences they may have had or haven't had out of maybe ignorance or something like that. And then you can really genuinely feel compassion for them. And then you're like, wait a minute, now what does that say about me? And then you can like, I don't know, I think that replacing the anger with compassion is the first step, and then starting to think about what does that say about me after has been working for me, instead of first thinking, what does that say about me first? Because then you're just like pissed. Nobody wants to think about their own faults before, like,
it's true.
That's all I have.
Awesome. You're an awesome mom. Mine too. They're probably the same person. Ways to repair a wrong view. So I'm just going to cruise through this so that we have a little time at the end to discuss, okay? So the first way to repair a wrong view, can you say tesom? So tesom is doubt. What does that mean? It means having doubt that your previous wrong view is correct, doubting your wrong view. So in the Abhidharma system, they say that actually the antidote to lokta, the antidote to cutting your virtue by saying like, this is absolutely wrong, like karma does not exist. The actual antidote to that is actually having a bit of doubt. It's saying like, maybe I was wrong, or maybe I just don't know. And that's enough to get you off the hook. I know, what?
It seems like a time lapse, like a time period where you could have this antidote because if you burned up all this stuff in the bank.
Yeah, I guess. Right, like how do you rebuild?
Yeah.
They have never talked, I've not seen anything about timing, but that's a good question. I have no answer to that. Perhaps now that you've seen it consecutively, though, within one session, you'll just keep that in your...
Do it right after.
Yeah. Okay. The second one, can you say nepa?
Nepa.
So nepa means positively identify with certainty. Means having certainty that your wrong view is wrong and the correct view is correct. Okay. So basically it's saying that you've had some sort of realization or understanding that whatever wrong view that you held, that you were so opposed to, that is actually correct. Okay. Good?
Can you explain that again?
It's basically saying, like, it's to actually have a direct realization or understanding that what you thought was not true, for instance, karma or emptiness, that in fact that you realize it's past having doubt. It's not that you're saying maybe it is true. It's actually saying no, I know for a fact that it's true.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good. Okay. Divisions of karma. Let me see how much more we have. I think this is okay. Divisions of karma. There are 2 divisions of karma. The first one, can you say penjekile? So penjekile is projecting to do karma. It's the projecting karma, which the way they use project is like shooting like an arrow. And in the Abhidharma system, they actually believe there's one karma that plays into the rebirth that you will have, your complete rebirth. So for instance, and this is from birth to your next rebirth. So it includes the bardo. So in the Abhidharma system, they believe that you have one specific karma that actually creates how you're going to be reborn, in which form, as well as the bardo system until you're reborn again.
Is this like Hector always, not always, but often talks about like the thought that's in your mind at the time of death is what?
It's different. Yeah. So in the mind-only school, right, in the highest school, they actually don't believe this. They think there's so many different matrices of karma. And so at when your mind, right, after death, and when you're in the bardo, and the bardo is usually, it's approximately 49 days that you're in the bardo system, that they'll say, like, right before you die, whatever state your mind is what you're talking about, right? Mm-hmm. Whatever state your mind is could actually, and while you're in the bardo, can actually propel you to where your next life is. There's a lot of other karmas that are in play there. So that's at the higher school. But in the Abhidharma school, they actually believe it's one karma that is the whole trajectory. But that's a great question. Yeah.
So I'm just curious then, what about like for people who die of like brain disease or like dementia or something, because like these happen to like very advanced Dharma practitioners as well.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's like when your brain deteriorates, what happens
to your consciousness?
Yeah.
Like, is your consciousness deteriorating?
I mean, is that like, it's...
I've heard in the past that when you see things like dementia, for instance, or hallucinations and stuff like that, that is not your consciousness per se, but that is a certain karma that's ripening to have an output that looks like that. But it's not like your consciousness has dementia.
But I guess my question is like, if the like basically if your reality that you're seeing gets like real wild and you're like 87 years old and like, you know, you don't remember your children and like things get weird. Yeah. Like how do you have hope for your time of death? Yeah. Like what if you forget the Dharma teaching? I mean, like that's a real thing that can happen.
Right. So from what I've heard is that your memory that you have that functions in your body is not the same reflection of your consciousness. So even though your brain, for instance, is having dementia, while you go through the bardo system, like you still have a level of consciousness. And that's why it's so important. They say like while you are completely alert and aware at the moment, that it's to have these practices so that you're not waiting till the last moment to try to have a certain type of understanding of what's happening. That's why you do it now. You build. It's like going into retreat. You can't be a jackass for 360 days out of the year and go into retreat for 5 days and think that you're going to have some amazing realizations. You might like have a body cleanse, but you can't misbehave. They add up. That's why like these virtues and these 6 perfections are so important as a daily practice, because you're building up your karma so that when you do go into retreat, you're building up your karma so that when you do die, that there are seeds that are there that can help propel you to do things that you need to do. You can't just bank on it. Like, it's like, you can't just go to your savings and be like, okay, I'm cashing out. And it's like, well, you didn't collect anything. You collected nothing. So you spend your life, your conscious time while you can to really collect, so that when it's time to cash out, you have something to cash out to go to a better life. I don't know why I'm using the banking system, but that just seems to work for me. Yes.
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
Is there interest?
Like, does it compound? Yeah. So if we're going to use the bank as, sure. So for the way that it would work, that analogy, which by the way, I've never heard anyone use this. So this is not in scripture. This is just how I think of it. This is sutra classes or open teachings. When you do tantra classes, which are closed teachings, then it's high reward, high risk. In a way, yeah. So you can make more by doing less. So it's like for every activity you do, you get $10, but if you have certain initiations, you can make like $1 million. But it also means for every time you do something that is a non-virtue, it takes you back further.
It's like investment banking.
It is. It's like iBanking. High risk, high reward. Yeah. That's why it's so important too, if you do take any type of initiations, what you understand you're in for. Because that can really screw you up. Yeah.
I find it strange that when we talk about karma, it's always like this life, but we don't remember our previous lifetimes. And if they say there's an infinite number, why this karma thing seems so limited?
At this moment in this class, we're talking about the limitations, but it is, when you have the direct perception of emptiness, you can actually see future lives and past lives. But we can't talk about it because you don't know it, and then we were just talking about it abstractly. But you can actually have foresight that way and back and forward.
Along with that question, actually both those questions. So, like the person who has Alzheimer's, you explained it in a very kind of nice way. Couldn't you just say that was their karma, to lose their consciousness, so they are screwed?
Not their consciousness, just their mental capacity, their memory.
The way you said it was, if you practiced all your life, even if you've lost your mental capacity, you still may be able to do this. But what if their karma is that they've practiced all their life and they're going to lose their mental capacity, which means they can't do it?
Yeah, but you're making the assumption that when they die, they're going to have Alzheimer's. You're making the assumption that when they pass physically, that their consciousness forever will have Alzheimer's. Their consciousness doesn't have Alzheimer's.
I get where you're going with that. I
just in that process, like while they have Alzheimer's.
You're implying that what they've built up in the bank will serve them.
It will serve you at some point.
It will serve you at some point, but it doesn't necessarily get you out of the loop, because maybe you've forgotten because of your Alzheimer's, you don't have the ability to do the practices you need to do at death.
I don't know if that's true.
Well, I don't know if it's true or not.
Yeah.
I'm saying it's certainly an explanation that would make sense with karma, right? That was your karma. Your karma was that it's like the turtle going up, right?
Yeah.
You got to the moment, but your karma was the thing moved. Right?
Yeah. Let me think about that a little bit more, because I don't know, because your consciousness isn't your brain. So the question to me then is, can you have Alzheimer's right? Where you have a loss of memory, but can you still have a level of consciousness that actually is still there, fully intact, fully able to practice? It just can't express with your physical body.
Right.
Right? That's the question.
A related question would be, do you need your brain to practice?
Yeah. I mean, the answer would be no. That would be the answer in this tradition.
That's scripture.
Because your brain isn't your consciousness. Yeah. I mean, that I can speak pretty, like, definitively.
So you're saying that you can have Alzheimer in your life and not be...
I think so. That seems to make sense, yeah.
For me, like, my grandma has Alzheimer and, like, I can tell that, like, it's not in her control, like, she's just...
Sure.
But she can remember where she was during the war, like, she had very, like, detailed memory. Just something is up.
Yeah. But that fundamentally makes sense, because when you do die, when your physical body dies, you still have a consciousness and you don't have a brain, and it still functions, and you move from different realms, and
so it's really no different than cancer.
Yeah, and your conscious
cancer.
Yeah.
I still have all the karma that I collected.
Yeah.
It's just that I die.
Yeah.
And I maybe didn't have enough time to collect more karma to get me out of this suffering, but maybe I did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you need to have that karma in that life, like working on that mission.
But there are like high holy beings who have certain kinds of karma where even when they pass, it looks like it's high torture, but actually for them it's not. It's their mind isn't, their consciousness is in a totally different state. So what looks like physical torture to us is actually not to them.
Is there a type of reincarnation or rebirth where you still remember who you were before?
Sure,
right?
Like tulkus.
Because otherwise, normally we would just erase our memory.
Yeah, I mean, tulkus are like a great example. They have memory for like the first 3 years when they're finding reincarnations. Oh, actually, I forgot to announce before people are leaving. I'll send an email. Next week we have a guest teacher, Geshe Lotar. Do you know who Geshe Lotar is? Okay, he's the I have his bio. He's a monk that actually is mostly in Jersey. What's the bio? Can you help me?
So
I have it somewhere.
Too, but from what I know, so Geshe Michael, his teacher is Ken Rinpoche.
Yes.
He studied with mainly in New Jersey, but Geshe Lotar was a young boy when he actually helped Ken Rinpoche escape Tibet and find refuge in India before coming to the United States. So he served him as his teacher. Geshe Lotar served Ken Rinpoche, who is Geshe Michael's teacher. And so there's like really beautiful recordings from the 90s where he's explaining that whole story. Like, it takes hours because he can only speak in Tibetan, and then there's a translator. He tells that entire story of that journey, and it's not like, I don't know, it's really beautiful. It's not like that it was just filled with fear and urgency and like craziness. Like, there's all these moments of like, simplicity and practice in it as well, and you hear the dedication in his voice, and that's
he is currently the house master at Saramay Monastery. He was a former vice abbot. That's what it was at Saramay. Anyway, he'll be here next week to talk about karma.
For ACI 5?
For ACI 5.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. He's great. He's you'll get like a nice Garupa monk in the class. Okay, we're gonna do one more and then we'll wrap up because I know we're running behind. Can you say Dzogche Kile? So that's complete to do karma. It's the finishing karma. What that basically means is that we've heard the word Dzog. Sometimes you'll hear it in Dzogchen, means completion, complete. And so you have one karma that's the projecting karma, which gives you, it's based on the Abhidharma system. They're saying there's one karma that gives you your entire life, however you're going to be reborn. And then the Dzogche Kile is actually how it's going to be completed. It's the finishing. It's like the finishing touches. It's like the details of your next life. Is it going to be good? Is it going to be bad? actually those aren't the right words. What's the overall type? Is it going to be, are you going to be born human and are you in poverty? Are you super wealthy? Are you living a comfortable life versus not? Like it's a coloration of what the life is going to be, the type of life. Yes.
So can you those two are sounding like the same thing in my brain.
Okay,
so
so the first one is like the karmic seed that propels you into what your life is going to be. Are you going to be born a human? Are you born an animal? Are you born a god? Are you born a hungry ghost? Is the first one, the projecting karma.
Okay.
The second one is once you're born into that, what kind of quality of life are you going to have?
Okay.
It's like the finishing touches of it.
So it's like which realm and then the qualities.
The quality of it. Like if you're born a dog, are you born a dog in a monastery versus? Sure. I mean, spots can be one, or it could be like, are you a stray dog? Are you a dog that's loved and cared for, or are you a stray dog? Are you a human that's born into a place of a lot of, devastation and political warfare, or are you born into a place where it's really comfortable and easy and you have all the luxuries of your life? That sort of thing. Cool?
Who chooses that?
You do. Well, you don't choose it, you create it based on your karma. Okay. I'm going to run through these 4 permutations very quickly. They're basically 4 different permutations of your projecting and finishing karma. They're like different, that's what they are, permutations. So the first one is good projecting, bad finishing. So basically the idea is that anything above a human birth is always good, right? And anything kind of below it is not so great. So for instance, if it's a good projecting and bad finishing, what's one thing that could be? What can that look like?
You could be a human but live in a poor place.
Yeah. Or you can be a human and be really sick all the time. But yeah, exactly. Right? So you know you're born a human, but the condition and the quality is not great. Yep. Second one, bad projecting, good finishing. What could that be?
A dog is a mansion.
A god, a what?
A dog living in a mansion.
In a mansion.
And his owner is a king.
A king's dog.
Yeah.
Great. So, I like your imagination. So the classic one is being born in the hell, like having a hell rebirth or living the lower realms, but then being the lord of hell, which technically there is like a lord of hell or a gatekeeper of hell. Sometimes you'll also hear nagas. Like, do we know what nagas is? It's nagas. It's a snake. It's a classic like human, half serpent being that's out there, and they're strange, or not, I should say strange, but they're unique creatures in that even though they're in the animal realm, they are very intelligent. They are they have property. They can talk. We can't see them. Naga is Sanskrit, and in the scriptures they talk about how Nagarjuna went into the Nagas to be able to get scripture, and that's where his name comes from, Nagarjuna. Yeah, and you see the serpent head sometimes in the statues. Yeah. Okay. Third one, good projecting, good finishing. What would that be? Yeah. Like having, so you can be like a human rebirth, become enlightenment would be like a pretty good finish. Be like rad finish there. Okay, last one. Bad projecting, bad finishing. Yeah. Hell rebirth with endless torment. That's what they have. Okay. That's it. We're about 15 after. I'm going to close class, and then I promise next week, or not next week because we have a guest teacher. In 2 weeks, we'll talk about dedication. Is that okay? Yes. Okay. I know.
Is the week after next the last one?
Huh?
Is the week after next the last one?
We're at 8, 9. Yeah, second, it'll be 9. Yeah. 2 more. So we have next class, which is not going to be based on
it's not. It's like
the teaching. That will be like a break.
Okay.
And then we'll do 9 and 10. And then we have review, which I'll try to find a fun way to do it. And then finals, which I'll try to find another fun way to do it. Okay. Awesome. Thanks for hanging in there.
Sashi Puki Jukshin Mito Tram Rira Minchi Nyande Gyempadi Sangye Chimdu Mikte Uwargi Roku Namda Shingla Druparsho Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamhirya Tayami Gewa Di Gewo Kun Sunam Yeshe Sokshin Sunam Yeshe Lejumwe Dampa Kuni Toparsho.
Just closing with the rejoice and dedication. Just take a few breaths and acknowledge your efforts for being here tonight. Rejoice in a way that makes sense to you in commending your presence, your attention, and your openness. Really take a moment to acknowledge that. And if you can, start to take that energy that you've created in commending yourself and dedicate it to someone that you love, someone who's struggling, maybe someone you don't like so much. Dedicate it to this one person, wishing and hoping that they will be able to find happiness, to be able to find relief from suffering. Wishing them everything that they seek to have. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, G.
Thanks for staying late.